Today we're together with Naomi Fisher. And first of all, Naomi, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. And before we hit record, we talked a little about, you asked me, what is your podcast about? And I came with a long-winded answer to
hmm
that. But basically, we like to talk with people who have made thoughts about parenting, and it's in the pursuit of freedom for all in the future. I believe if we are to create free people that knows how to be in the world, we need to look at our kids and make sure that they have a free life as well, and also when it comes to education. So if we can start out with a very open question, which is, what is freedom to you?
Oh, freedom to learn or freedom in the whole world? I don't know. I think it's a really complicated question, but I think when it comes to education and children, I think that for me, freedom means being able to follow your interests or their interests without being influenced unduly by the effect and the thoughts of others. So I see that one of the processes that happens at school is that very quickly we take the responsibility for children's learning away from them, and we say to children, you aren't the best, you aren't the person who can make the best choices about what you should be learning and what you should be doing. The teacher knows better than you, the school knows better than you. And in fact, the school knows so much better than you that the school is allowed to compel you to do the things that we think will help you learn. And we're going to do that through a whole set of systems, but partly we're going to do it by rewarding you when you do the things that you want to just we want you to do, and by not rewarding you when you don't do the things that we want you to do. So we are going to effectively manipulate your choices because we think we know better for you. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and a lot of what I think about is how can I help children and adults make their choices for themselves.
And if we can unpack it a little,
Mhm.
what do you think it does to a person to take away that choice?
Yeah.
Because that is what made me and us, and it came from my wife. I'm like a classical homeschool unschool dad, where after 10 years I'm like love to talk about it, but in the first many years all the honor goes to my wife, and I was just like, what this weird thing she has going on, whatever, I
Mhm.
follow along.
And now I hear him say the things I repeated 10
Oh
years
yes,
ago.
oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes.
It's about
Classic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
and now
And I all,
shine.
yeah, yeah. I like
Yeah.
to start out with it. So all honor goes to my wife by
Mhm.
leading me down the path and opening my eyes. But back to the question, which is, what does it do to a person, you think, to have this choice removed, being controlled in this way?
I think it does lots of things. One is that I think over time, it makes it much harder to make decisions for yourself because you're always thinking more about what do other people want me to make decisions about. And so I'm a therapist, I'm a psychologist, but I meet women in particular, sometimes in their 30s and 40s, and they say, I don't even know what it means anymore to make a decision for myself. I'm always just making a choice based on what do other people want me to do? What is going to be the reward here? Where am I going? And they don't really have much sense of inner direction. And I think that's so sad because if you see young children, they usually have so much inner direction. They really know what they want to do, they know how they want to do it. And that's quite hard for their parents a lot of the time. And I think that one of the things that happens in a conventional education system is that we kind of subvert that self-direction because we want them to do the things that we want them to do. Um, so I think it has that impact, but I think the other impact that it has is, unfortunately, it takes a lot of the joy out of life, because I think a lot of what makes life meaningful is thinking about what is it that makes life meaningful to me. And in order to be able to think that and to develop that understanding, you have to be able to make choices for yourself. You have to be able to say, right, I'm going to try following this lead, and maybe it will go somewhere that interests me, maybe it won't, but that process is something that I can do, that I'm in charge of.
Can I add to that?
Mhm.
One of the things that I've put a lot of thought into over the years is we're colleagues. I don't know if you know, but I'm also a
Mhm.
clinical psychologist. And I
Yeah.
put a lot of thought into exactly this, that growing up self-directed, growing up with freedom, you get to make your own choices, which also means you get to make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
You get to go to
Lots.
bed at night feeling frustrated and annoyed and overstimulated or understimulated or whatever, realizing you made choices that didn't bring you joy.
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
this is one of the skills that my kids now have, that they know how to keep themselves happy. They know what they want and they know what they do want because they have experience making choices and realizing what did this do to me? How did I feel after? What did it do to the people around me whom I love? And what did it do to my next day? What were my options after making this choice? These kind of things we just steal from a whole generation. And it's from the day they start being able to make choices, we tell them what choices are the better choices. It's actually before school. It starts so early, and it
begins with
continues.
sticker charts and
Anything, you know, you even give them toys when they are really little that you're supposed to use in a specific way, so they can use them right or wrong. I had the most funny laugh ever with my cousin who has young children. She's younger than me and she has young children. One of them is not even 2 years old. And she had that, you know, these boxes where you can put a round one in a round hole and a square one in a, but this box was made so that all of the little toys could go into the largest hole. And the kid figured that out within like 15 minutes.
Why bother slotting them into the other ones?
She sent me a video and we were laughing so much because the kid was using the toy wrong.
Yes.
She'd hacked it.
She'd worked it out. Absolutely. And there are research studies that show Alison Gopnik, who's a psychologist whose work I really like in the US. She does these studies where they give children a toy that can be played with in different ways. And if the adult shows them how to use it, says, this is how you use this toy, then they play with it less imaginatively and for less long than if the adult says, I don't know how you use this toy. I don't know what it's meant to do, and just like shakes it and then leaves them with it. Then they learn much more because they explore, they try things out, they test things out. But we're all the time trying to put them in this box of this is how you should be using this. This is the right way to do this, isn't it? Yes, and I think we do rob them from it. We take that away from them.
We have this running joke in our family with our son he turned 19 yesterday and he's been unschooled, forever. And we say that he's unschooled, which means he's free to do whatever he wants to do, as long as what he wants to do is what I want him to do. Because that's the lurking danger, right? That we have to think about parenting in a different, we have to really stay sober.
Yes, it's really hard. We have to stay non-attached to the process, I think is part of it. That the more, because a parental attachment to a particular ideal of how your child should be is pressure. Whatever I meet parents, for example, I think there's lots of this in the home ed community where people will have this idea of what they think a free child should be doing. And it's often lots of time outdoors. So, I want them to be running around freely in the woods, playing. And all my kid wants to do is play Minecraft on the computer. How am I getting it wrong? Because they have this, and I always say to them, that's just as restrictive. This idea you have, they must be like this, is restrictive. Whether you think that's lots of lovely outdoor play, which might be lovely for you, but not so lovely for them, or whether your restrictive is you should be sitting at a desk doing your maths. You can restrict a child in many ways. And I think that's why a lot of the work of unschooling is parental work, because the children, they generally are much better at it than we are because most of us were schooled.
Yes. I also think it's very important for unschooling parents to be very clear if we do have expectations or values, because we do. And I am not a see-through person, and I am not without judgment or values. And there are things I think my kids should do and not do. And there are things I think they should learn. I'm not saying they will be bad persons if they don't. But for example, I tell them I think they should speak 5 languages, and I stand by that. They are up to 3 at this point, which is fine. And I do think so. I think they will be just as happy almost as happy, great people if they don't do it. But the things I think they should, I tell them very clearly that I think so, because I think all the subtleness, all the judgment, and all the little signs, if I have an opinion, it might be, you might correct me, it might be better if I didn't have it. That might be a more beautiful unschooling process, but for as long as I do have it, and I do, I just let them know, this is where I stand, this is my opinion, you're free to have a different opinion, but this one is mine. All of the manipulation was the first thing you started talking about. I find that very interesting, and that's why I went back to the little toddlers, because we start so early manipulating our children into becoming something that we want them to become. And that's why we have this running joke, you can be what you want as long as it's what I want you to want, because they pick that up all the time.
Of course they do. Yeah.
And we
I mean, I
have
think
to be very sober with that.
we do. I think that transparency goes a long way to negating manipulation, because I think manipulation is generally unspoken. So there's often, actually, that's not quite true at school. It's pretty overt. But I do think that there's something, particularly as they get older, about just putting it out there that I would like it if you learnt 5 languages, but ultimately it's your life and not mine. And those are your decisions to make. And I think that that's where we want to go with our adult children, ultimately, don't we? We don't want to spend our lives with our adult children not being able to say things to them. And I think I've seen that sometimes with unschooling parents, where they're like, I can't ever say anything because I don't want to influence them. And I think we do influence our children. We absolutely, everything we do influences our children. We make life choices for our children all the time, where we live, what we eat, all of those kind of things, we make them. Go on,
And
Jasper.
also children look towards us for guidance, and then if there's just this blank canvas of almost where you
They
restrict
panic.
yourself for having one, that must be very difficult to grow up in also as a child.
And it's fake. It's fake. It's basically lying to your children, because I have yet to meet a parent who doesn't have opinions. They do have opinions on good and bad. They do have value systems, and they do have things they think are better than other things. A lot think that playing outside is better than playing Minecraft. Some of the unschoolers even hold it on like a high pedestal to do non-academic stuff. And if the kids sit down with math or language or history of the world, Greece, they're like, why are you doing that? Why don't you go build a stick ship or something like that? And I mean, so there are these clear values like oozing out of the parents. It's way better to just
to make them transparent. I agree. I wonder if that's something that's quite Danish as well. I'm just thinking about culture. I'm really interested in culture and how it affects what we do, because we lived in France for a couple of years. And one of the things that I really noticed, the different culturally between English people and French people, is French people were far more direct. They would just tell you down the line. English people, we hate being direct. We are really indirect about everything. And I would compose these emails I would send to people, that were very indirect. And I would get these emails back that were just completely, no, sorry, can't do that. And I was like, that's completely not English. We never say that. We always I would wish I could do this, but I can't. So I think there is something, I wonder if there's a cultural element there, partly.
We are very blunt. We're very blunt. And I personally am
that's how you
are. Direct Dane there is.
During the last half year, we've been like 3 or 4 months on off in UK. And it's really weird how you can ask people directly about something. And I, with my cultural background, believes I will get a direct answer to my direct question.
No, you won't.
No, but then even if I ask again, it's like, it's very difficult for me to pick up hints that are not there.
So even if you say, I really need to have your opinion on this matter, can you please tell me what you think about this? Because I need to know where you stand. Can you please just tell me? Then you still don't get an answer.
No,
it's really interesting.
It is really interesting, and it's a very strong. And people, of course, don't realize they're doing it, because when you're in your culture, you're just in your culture. You don't know that that's different, or that other cultures might do it differently.
Well, we have a few English families that we spend time with who have been traveling a lot, and that makes it easier. So they say, one of them actually said it to me a year or two ago when we met, like, you're the kind of person, I just sell you things, right? I just say it.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
just been
Just
the foundation of our
down the
relationship.
line. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's weird because our culture is so much alike in many other ways that it's like we feel it's the same
deceiving.
culture and then it's
Yeah.
not. And it's one of the joys of traveling is meeting these different cultures and sometimes just be baffled.
Yeah, and it is often when you think there are fewer differences that you find there are more. I certainly have had that with Americans that, because we share a language, you think, oh, we must share a culture. And then the more time you spend with Americans, you're more like, oh no, this is culturally very, very different.
Yeah.
And again, the whole way people relate to each other is very different. The big difference I always see with Americans and English people is that English people don't like to either blow their own trumpet, to say how great they are doing things, but also they don't really they're not really so into praise. So Americans will much more be into, they'll praise their children a lot more, whereas English people tend to be much more downplayed. Everything's kind of, that's quite good, well done, you could have done better, and that's just cultural. Again, that's how we do it.
You mentioned the people you meet in your work, where you said, it sounded like you draw a line from the experience they have in the childhood up to being that they are indecisive based on they having all these choices made for them. Are there any other similarities where you see the same problem and where you think it might comes from the whole schooling system or the way we direct from above?
So I see lots of people who've learnt to think of themselves as incapable in the school system, or they've learnt to think of themselves as not good at learning, or behind, or slow, or all the words that we use in the school system. And they've often learnt to blame themselves for that. They've often learnt, they've been told you need to work harder, you need to try harder. And they carry that with them through life. So I think, I'm always amazed. Well, I'm not amazed anymore, but when I see people in their 30s and 40s, they'll sometimes have the voice of a particular teacher ringing in their head. And that will have been a particular teacher who said, I don't know why you're struggling with this, or everybody else finds this easy. What's wrong with you? And those words just kind of echo through the ages for them. But I think particularly with the choices thing, I meet people who, when I ask them, what do you want? They've almost never asked themselves that question before. Because they start telling me, and it is particularly mothers, they'll start telling me what their children want and what their partner wants, and maybe even what their mother wants, actually. That's all about what everybody else wants. And it's like there's never been the space for what about me? What do I want? And when I see, because I work with quite a few young people who come out of school, so young people who've been to school for a certain amount of time, and then it's gone badly wrong, usually. And so their parents have taken them out of school. And then there's this process of recovery that they go through. And one mother who I was talking to about this, who's telling me about her 14-year-old daughter, she put it in such a lovely way. She said, I knew she was starting to get better when I saw her wants coming back. And it was like she was when she was younger. Her wants started to come back. And in the case of this young person, the wants were that she wanted to dress as a vampire and she wanted to learn how to do horror film makeup. So, and it's often those are people's wants. I think people are often looking, if their children have been at school, they're looking for, oh, I want to do maths or I want to do English. But actually, that's not what it's about, because those are the wants that have been put upon them and imposed upon them. You should be doing these things. When it's a want, like I want to dress like a vampire, I'm pretty sure probably that's coming from that young person. So, and I think that looking for your wants, finding your wants again, I think is such a fundamental process of becoming a kind of actualized human being and becoming a human being who's able to make decisions about your life. And what I see in the self-directed young people that I work with and have in my life is that process of their wants hasn't been taken away from them. So they've still, as teenagers, they're usually very in tune with their wants in a way that often can be quite hard to work with or to be with as a parent, because they're not into this, I must do this because you want me to. I must do this because I'm being made to. And though all those things make people more convenient, they make them easier to manage. A group of teenagers who've learned that it doesn't really matter what they want, because what matters is the teacher, what the teacher wants, they're going to be easier to manage than a group of self-directed teenagers who are like, yeah, no, I don't think this is the best use of my time, or I'm not really learning anything from this lesson, so I'll leave. That kind of, that thing is hard to live with, but really useful, really important, I think.
But isn't it mostly hard to live with if we have them constricted in the school system?
Well, it can be hard to live with in your family, depending on the age of your children, because if you've got children who are very good at saying, no, I do not want to do this, even though my sibling really does want to do this, and we have to go together because I'm not old enough to be left in the house, for example, that kind of thing. Do you see what I mean? I think whenever you're managing a group of people, whether they're in a family or in a school or in a home ed group, it can be more challenging to manage. I don't think that means it's a bad thing. I think growing up is full of challenges, and that's maybe part of being human, is negotiating those challenges. And I think you have to you're working then with, okay, we've got these very different wants in this family. How do we bring those together? How do we make that work in a way that works for you? I mean, I don't know in your family, if you're traveling all the time, if one of your teenagers was like, my want is to stay put. I want to be in one country now. I just want to live here. And I'm going to tell you that. I don't know how your family system would manage that, but I think that's the kind of thing I mean, that they're not, you know what I mean, that you're saying what you want and you're not afraid to say it and you're not afraid to keep on saying it.
There's a colleague actually many, many years ago when I was still at the office who said to me, oh, but it seems like you have so many dialogues at home that you talk all the time, because he was like, have you also thought about this and about that and about that? And in the start, it was Cecilia doing a lot of the talking, and then I slowly came up to speed. But then the kids, the more they have grown in age, oh man, there's a lot of different ones. But that means a lot of dialogue, a lot of taking everyone's needs into account. And that's, for example, why we were in UK way longer than I wanted to be, because as we can move with the sun, UK in December was not my first choice.
No.
But the kids have some really good friends they wanted to hang out with, and then I was like, okay, yep, that's what we do as a family. Then it is my time to say okay and step back.
Yeah.
I think the reason I asked the question about the teenagers being hard to manage is I hear this. It's like a refrain going on in the parenting world, that teenagers are so hard to manage and it's so hard to be a parent of teenagers. And we happen to, as from 2 days ago, we now have 3 teenagers. We have 1 year and 1 day with 3 teenagers, and I've been looking forward to this. I love it.
Yeah.
But actually, so our oldest is 25, so we've had teenagers for quite some time now.
Yeah.
And the youngest is 13. So in my personal experience with my own children, and also with the other home educated, especially unschooled teenagers that I at this point know quite a lot of, is I just love them. I think they are great. I think they are easy to talk to. I think they are clear in their minds. They are straightforward. They are balanced. They are cooperative. They are interested. They are motivated. They're fun. They have very clear opinions. They make very nice analysis of things. They make me smarter when I talk with them. And I do not find it a hassle at all to have teenagers at all. I have 4 children. I think it was quite hard work when they were small. I also had just beat cancer when I got the 4th one, so I was pretty tired. But I think even without that, it would have been, there's a lot of legwork. There's a lot of things that are out of your control, that there's a lot of urgency all the time when they are small. And I think that was challenging. And we had some things we had to navigate when they were younger that gave me some sleepless nights. But with the teenagers, I think it's a thrill. And I really don't think it's hard to work with them. They have very clear opinions and they know exactly what they want, but they are also used to being listened to. They are used to getting the life that they want to have, but they don't want to take it away from their siblings. So if there are contrasting agendas, they even just talk to each other before they even come to me and say, well, how about we do it this way? Because then we can all, the ship has to sail. And I need this and my brother needs that, and why don't we do it like this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. But I'm here too, and I'll need a coffee. So could we add that? And then we do that, and it works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe I'm just lucky. I really haven't seen these, oh, it's so hard to have teenagers. Oh, they're so annoying or troubling or anything like that.
I think teenagers are fabulous. I absolutely don't think they are hard or annoying, but I think they are going through a process of individualizing, of becoming who they are. And for some of them, that's quite a challenging process, but also for some of them, that can include rejecting some of what their parents have offered, even if what their parents has offered has been unschooling, for example. I think, because I mean, obviously I'm going to have a biased perspective because I'm a clinical psychologist. So people come to me when there are problems. So I see the people who have problems. So that's, you know, how it is. And I also know many self-directed teenagers who are flying and flourishing and are amazing. And in fact, and also I think, though I think a lot of teenage behavior which people perceive as problematic is simply part of being a teenager. So when I say inconvenient for others, I mean in a conventional mindset, you want people to just say, yes, I'll do this, and not to make a fuss about it. And actually what you find with your self-directed teenager is they'll say, no, I don't really want to do this. Or they'll say, well, I will do it, but I'm going to make it clear I don't want to do this. I'm doing it because of this. And, you know, that jars with people because that's not what they're used to. But that doesn't mean I think there's a problem with them. I absolutely don't. But I do think that teenage adolescence can be a time of vulnerability. And I think the research shows that it's a time when you're moving from childhood through to independence. And for some young people, that change is a really difficult one. And for some, it's not, and that's great. But for some, it can be a period when young people become very depressed or become very anxious because they become more capable of thinking about the future. And I do know young people who've become very angry with their parents at this stage of life because, for example, they say, I just wanted to be like everyone else. Why didn't you send me to school? I don't want to be having to say to people all the time, yes, I didn't go to school. Yes, I'm different. You know, I just want to be like everyone else. And parents find that really difficult when they've made all these choices. They've moved the world to give their children this alternative experience of education. And now the children are turning around and saying, couldn't you have just sent me to the local school? Wouldn't it have all have been easier for me? And I think, yes, and I think unschooling parents find that particularly difficult when it happens because they are not expecting that to happen. They, you know, I think if you're taking a conventional route through parenting, you do kind of expect your teenagers to rebel or to reject you, all of that kind of thing. It's kind of part of the narrative of what's going to happen. But unschooling parents don't expect that. They don't expect their children to turn around and say, what about school?
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. And it is a period of great both physical and inner change. Becoming a teenager, we are on our fourth one going through that process, and it can be terrifying with being a parent, and you can be like, how do we handle this?
But this is part of a process, and I think a lot of time when I'm working with parents of teenagers, I am saying to them, you know, this behavior that you think is indicative of something that's really wrong, maybe, is part of their process of growing up. For example, if your child's really angry with you because they say that they wanted to go to school and you didn't send them to school, then that is part of their process of working out what is important to me, and that I'm not the same as my parents, and the choices that my parents made might not be the choices that I make. And I have to come to terms with that as a person who's growing up, and I have to come to terms with the fact that I might disagree with their decisions and I still love them and they still love me, and we can have different opinions on things. And I think that process can be more painful for some parents than others. And it's interesting, Cecile, you're saying that you feel there's a dominant narrative about teenagers being hard and difficult, and there definitely is. But I think there's also can be a narrative in this kind of self-directed unschooling world of you shouldn't have any of these problems if you've unschooled your teenager right. And that's the parents I see who are like, what have we done wrong? You know, we did all of this. We didn't send them to school. They've been unconditional parenting, no rewards and punishments. And look, here they are at 14 and they're really depressed and anxious. What did we do wrong? And I think, so I think part of what I'm saying is it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Growing up is hard sometimes. Growing up is a difficult process, and you're with them alongside them with that in the highs and the lows.
But it's also actually a really huge expectation to have on your children if you choose to unschool, which is,
Yes.
at the end of the day, it was my choice to unschool the
Yeah.
children. He got on board, and we did do the checking. I think it was once a year. We asked them, do you want to go to school? Do you want a different
Yeah.
lifestyle? And now it's like a waste of time to ask them, but
Yeah.
we still do. I mean, it's different now. But for the first years, we just kept checking. So in a way, of course, they were on board with it. But still, I know this is my idea. This
Yeah.
comes from us, the parents. We're parenting in this way. And we're going to make a lot of choices while they grow up that will affect their life, that will be defining for the way they can unfold themselves during their childhood. And they might not agree with that. That it might, they might. I mean, I've known that the whole time, that there's no guarantee. And what I'm trying to get to saying is, if unschooling parents think that unschooling is a guarantee that your kids will agree with you forever within everything.
No.
And when you put it like that, it's pretty obvious that it's stupid,
or
right?
actually also a guarantee that life will be easier for them, because I think there is sometimes that expectation that, you know, they won't go through the other issues that young people sometimes go through whilst growing up because we've chosen not to send them to school. And I think
No, I'm just like, that would be so easy, and we could all like see how be in the shining light of, oh, we have done the perfect job as a parent. Oh yes.
Well, and I think teenagers can feel that pressure. They can feel like I'm you know, some of the people who I read when I first started out in unschooling were some of the British people would never talk about their children. There was a sort of whole movement of people, they called themselves, they were autonomous educators, and they would never talk about their children at all, which makes it quite difficult to discuss unschooling and self-directed education. But their rationale was, my children are not the product. This is not about, you know, they are not an outcome of what I'm doing. We're doing what we're doing because it's worth doing, and they are not the outcome. And I respect them more and more as my children grow up for that taking that stance, because I think there can be a pressure. And that's one of the reasons I don't talk in detail about my children, because I don't want them to be seen as an outcome of choice of, you know, that's not fair on them.
No, it isn't.
It is very difficult with the mindset I have grown up with, being in school and going to work and all this. And I actually wanted to try to explore a subject, us three together, which is about the want of a person. Because I know a lot of our listeners also come from a parenting background where they are not necessarily self-directed or unschooling, but are maybe sneak peeking. So it's just a thinking aloud process I would like to invite you to, which is, so if you have a normal setting, you go to work, you have your kids in a public school or a private school or whatever, how can is there any suggestions we can give to how a parent can help increase their child's wants?
Keep the wants alive.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's harder, obviously, when they're at school, but I think you can try to make the space for that. And one of the ways of making the space for that is making sure that they don't spend all the rest of their time in activities that are structured a lot like school. I've always found it amazing, in a bad way, that a lot of the activities that children do outside school replicate lots of the structures at school in a way that those activities don't for adults. So, you know, if you go and do, my daughter did drama for a while, very quickly it was about levels of drama and passing. They had tests, they got certificates, and she didn't want to do it anymore. And I was like, what? You know, we just did drama because it's meant to be fun. And and everything becomes really quickly about how well you're doing it. And we tried art classes once, and it was all about learning the basic techniques and drawing little lines. And I'm like, why do we bring this school perspective into everything? So everything a child does, they're being told what you want to do, how you want to be is less important than how I want you to be. And I think we need to consciously look out environments and places that don't do that for our children. And I think we can. I think there are some. You know, it's often about the individual instructor or the teacher. You'll meet one and you'll be like, oh, they really get it. I don't know if you have had that experience, but you can.
No, I was just thinking, and then parents wonder why children like Minecraft, where they have the
Yes,
creative control. I'm like, hey,
they're,
come
they're in
on.
control of the world, aren't they? Minecraft is amazing because you are in control of your own world. And if you die, you just come back to life again and you go and pick up your stuff and you
Yeah.
carry on. It's brilliant.
Also, I think if you have your child in a school setting, but you want to try to navigate the waters mindful of allowing the child to grow up knowing what he or she actually really likes
Yeah,
and to be able to make their own choices, it's would be a very good idea to be very clear about what the school is, to
yeah,
cut the bullshit. If you talk about the school, why are you in school? What is all this reward thing
yeah,
about? What is a curriculum? Why do you have to obey the teachers? Why do you have to, act in this way? And just call it that. This is what it is. You have to do this because whatever the family has decided. And the system works like this. And it's
yeah.
going to affect you in this way. And you can hack it in this way. And I don't want to see your
Agree.
Grades.
grades when you
Yeah,
come home. I
yeah,
don't want to see what the teachers write about you. I'm not going to show up for these meetings where they tell me whether you're good or bad or not. I'm never doing it. I'm never showing up for that in the school. They can keep that to themselves. I'll help you if you ask me for help, but I would prefer not to. I'm not going to be the school's policeman. If you handle the school that way, I've seen it done. It's pretty radical when it's done, but it can be done. Of course, if you're a responsible parent, you call the school, you have a conversation with the headmaster or the main teacher, or whatever, and say, this is my opinion on the school and what role it can have in our lives. This is why you're never going to see me. This is why I'm not signing these grade book things. If I have to do it, I'll do it with my eyes closed, just so you know. And I'm not going to be your policeman. If you
I
do
think,
that, it's a
yeah.
game changer. It really is. And you can tell your child, don't let the school get in the way of your life. Make sure you still have a life. It can be done.
It can, but I think it can also be risky. If
Oh,
you
yeah.
are somebody, for example, who is likely to trigger concerns by the school, then if you are a single parent or if you are living in poverty or if you're marginalized in other ways, then I think if you do that, you potentially trigger a whole set of social care referrals and all that kind of thing.
Oh,
And
yes.
I think there's also something there, which is that I think for some children, it's very difficult to be in this school system and then to be having their parents saying, it's essentially a game. We're doing it because we need to do it for these things, but I'm not buying into it. As a parent, I'm not buying into it. And I have met children who found it very difficult to be in that sort of halfway place of I kind of have to buy into it because I'm there every day and I don't have a choice about that. And yet my parent is saying they don't buy into it. And where does that leave me? And I've had some children who have become very distressed by that. And I've also had other children who have gone and talked about all of that in school very openly to all the other children. And that has created a lot of issues in the class because the other parents don't want their children coming home being told, well, these things are, and it can go lots of different ways. And I think it depends on your child and also the age of the child, because I think, again, that's something teenagers are much more likely to be able to hold than a younger child. But the other thing I was going to say about helping keep those wants is I think that you can show as a parent that you invest in the wants of the child as much as you invest in the wants of the school. Because I often hear of parents, particularly if their child's struggling at school, they will scrimp every penny they can to have extra maths tutoring and extra English tutoring, all in the hope that this child will now be doing better at school. And the message that child gets again is out of school, this is what's really important. And those parents will sometimes say things like, oh, I can't afford to pay for the full version of Minecraft, for example. I can't afford to pay for this new game they want on the console. And it's often about video games because people often don't value video games, and they're often a very strong interest that lots of young people have. And I'd say to them, it's a really powerful message to that child to say, if this is what you're interested in, I'm going to put money into it in the same way as if you were really, really interested in maths, I would put money into it, because we're all the time dividing up a child's interests, aren't we? We're saying, we'll invest in that interest. We'll pay for you to have piano lessons, but we won't pay for you to buy this new game. Or I will sit with you and practice your piano, but I won't sit with you and watch you play Minecraft. And I think you can, as a parent, you can make that shift to say, I'm going to invest in the things my child is really interested in, even if I personally think they are not as worthy, not as good a way for them to spend their time as a school-based thing or piano lessons or whatever it is.
I like it. I know that we talked about the cultural differences, for example, between the States and UK. And one of the things with the people in UK is they don't in the same way brag or promote themselves. But now I'm asking you, as we are trying, I would like to round out the conversation. So if people, so you've written a lot of books, so if you can mention a little about your books and also how people can find you if they want to work with you or listen to understand more of your work.
Yes. So I wrote a book called Changing Our Minds, How Children Can Take Control of Their Education, which is really about self-directed learning. And it's particularly trying to bring the psychology research and self-directed learning together. Because one of the things that happened to me when my children didn't go to school was I was watching them grow and watching them learn. And I was thinking, you know, so much of this dovetails with what I know about developmental psychology and how children learn, but nobody seems to be noticing that. Nobody seems to be writing about it, because I realized that all of my psychology training was entirely with children at school. You know, that was like, I did a research doctorate before I did my clinical psychology. It was on autistic children. I visited children at school. I didn't even realize that a very high proportion of autistic children are actually home educated, because why would I? So there was like this huge gap in my knowledge of developmental psychology, because I didn't know how children developed outside a school setting. And I still don't think we really know, you know, we're finding our way. And it was so interesting to me to see how differently I think my children have developed and how other children have developed outside that school setting. It's not like, you know, you just carry on as if they went to school. I sometimes joke, you know, I wish we'd had clones, so we could have sent one version to school and just see what the difference would be, because as a psychologist it would be so interesting. I'm sure there would be huge differences, but I don't know what they would be. So yes, so Changing Our Minds is my first book, which is all about self-directed education, and it's kind of deep dive into lots of the research. Then I wrote another one, which is called A Different Way to Learn, Neurodiversity and Self-Directed Education. And that's particularly about neurodivergent families or families with neurodivergent children, autistic children, ADHD, other things, I think, as well. And I interviewed lots of families for that book. And that was partly because I felt that from my own experience online, the kind of stories of those families was often not really there, was often kind of absent in a lot of the home ed, the discourse. They weren't kind of really, I think it's changed now. I think they're much more visible now, but certainly when we were starting out, they weren't really visible. And then I've written a book about parenting, which is called When the Naughty Step Makes Things Worse, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's for parenting for children for whom punitive strategies like the naughty step or take time out make things worse. So that's kind of stepping out of the alternative education arena. It's aimed at parents, all parents. And then my most recent one is The Teenager's Guide to Burnout. And that is a self-help book for teenagers. And really, it's for teenagers who are coming out of school, for whom school has gone badly wrong. And that they often, what I find with teenagers who've stopped going to school, is that there's very negative narratives that they have around their future. Other people have that as well. It's very much like, you know, they're told at school, if you don't go to school, you're never going to amount to anything. They're literally told that. If you don't go to school, you'll never get a good job. If you don't go, and they come out of school and they still believe all those things.
Yeah.
They're stuck in this horrible limbo where it's like, I know I can't go to school because it just is awful for me. But if I stay at home, my entire future is over. I have no future.
What a promise to give children.
It's just horrible.
Yeah.
So that book,
Yeah.
this book is for them. So this book is very
no.
much about the difficulties with school, why school might not be the right place, and about trying to get some hope for the future.
Cool. And please, for the people not read the
website.
show's note, yes, the website.
Yes, naomifisher.co.uk is my website, and you can find information about all of my books there, and other podcasts and webinars I do for parents and everything else I do.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot for your time, Naomi. It has been a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It's been really interesting. I feel like we should be digging deeper into teenagers and all of it. I think it's really fascinating.